Sicilians are fighting for their place in America, and Oscar is thinking to himself, I need to survive. Oscar realized that his Sicilian roots might limit his opportunities. So Oscar made a decision that would change the course of his life. He would become Iron Eyes Cody. And Native American characters were high in demand, but there was a problem. Oscar de Corti was neither a cowboy nor a Native American. For young Oscar, his life in rural Louisiana was anything but easy. By the time he was 5 years old, his father, Antonio, had gotten himself tangled up with the Black Hand, an early form of organized crime that really preyed on Italian immigrants. Hi, I'm Danielle Romero, and thank you so much for being with me here on my channel where we talk about American identity and family stories. And I've shared a lot about my family story on this channel. Lots of different backgrounds. My dad's side in particular is Southern Italian, Sicilian, I've been told, and I've worked that out a little bit. So this video in particular was of extreme interest for me while I was researching it because it kind of combines things that I talk about on the channel and they seem like they wouldn't go together, but they do. That's how this story feels to me because we're going to talk about Native American heritage. We're going to talk about the media. We're going to talk about Sicilian immigrants in Louisiana. Like this is exactly the kind of story that I want to tell. So I want to tell you a story about a little boy named Oscar. And Oscar de Corti was born in 1904 in Louisiana, I think in Vermilion Parish, Louisiana, which was a region that was known for sugarcane fields. A lot of hardworking immigrant labor came there. His parents were Antonio de Corti and Francesca Salpetria. I think that's her name. They come from Sicily, and they brought with them their cultural roots, their hopes for that better American life. And Francesca's family had been Sicilian vineyard people. The hope was that they would be able to kind of start something like that here in the United States. But the realities of life in America were starkly different from the vineyards in Italy or in Sicily. And immigrants like Francesca were often relegated to jobs that were backbreaking work, the labor of the sugarcane fields. Because remember, what happened was after the Emancipation Proclamation, well, there were no more enslaved people to do this insane backbreaking work on the plantations. So what happened was there were advertisements going out to Europe, and especially targeting Italy, and saying, we've got jobs for you here. Come and get these jobs. And a lot of the immigrants that came over didn't intend to stay. They were going to come over, make money, send money home, and then go back because Italy had just gone through the reunification, basically taking very disparate places and smushing it together and saying, okay, now this is Italy. A lot of unemployment, just bad times. People are coming over here. So they're coming over here. But what they're finding is not what they expect. People have to do this work. Someone has to do it. So the immigrants step in and they're getting paid, to do this backbreaking labor. Now, Francesca had an arranged marriage, which was pretty typical of the time. And so she's married and then they have Oscar. Now, for young Oscar, his life in rural Louisiana was anything but easy. By the time he was 5 years old, his father, Antonio, had gotten himself tangled up with the Black Hand, which was an early form of organized crime that really preyed on Italian immigrants. And so to escape the clutches of this criminal organization, Antonio fled to Texas, which is right next to Louisiana, leaving Francesca to care for Oscar and the rest of the kids all by herself. So the de Corti family, who were already struggling to make ends meet, were now left in an even more precarious situation with Francesca shouldering the burden of raising her children and working to keep the family afloat. This is the world Oscar was born into, a world of hardship, poverty, survival. Perhaps even at this young age, Oscar learned how to adapt, how to navigate the challenges as both an outsider and an immigrant. And I've done a lot of videos about the experience of Sicilians in particular in Louisiana and the largest mob lynching, not government lynching, and not the most lynched, but the largest mob lynching at once were Sicilians in New Orleans, in Louisiana, just like 15, 20 years prior to this. I did a video on this. I really explored a lot of the nuance between the freed men and their families and the relationship with Sicilian immigrants, because for a little while, they were living in a lot of the same communities in Louisiana, areas that were considered segregated, by color during Jim Crow, a lot of these Sicilian immigrants didn't know or didn't care. Those are the neighborhoods they lived in. And a lot of times they were relegated to those places based on how they looked. You think about a Sicilian or a Southern Italian working outside in Louisiana all day long. Some can get pretty dark. And so that was kind of the world that Oscar grew up in. Now, these early experiences would shape the decisions he would later make, decisions that would lead him far away from the sugarcane fields of Louisiana and into the bright lights of Hollywood. So in the 1920s, Oscar's father reappeared in Texas and eventually made his way to Hollywood. And his father found work as a technical advisor for Western films that were gaining popularity. So he brought his sons with him, and it wasn't long before Oscar followed in his father's footsteps, seeking work in the burgeoning film industry out there. Hollywood, you think about the American dream. This is like a dream within a dream. Hollywood with the promises of fame and fortune must have seemed like an entirely different world to Oscar from where he grew up in rural Louisiana. But the transition wasn't immediate or easy. For a while, Oscar toured with a Wild West show, and he played out the myths and legends of the American frontier. And this is something that's always interesting to me. That I've seen, over and over again, talking to people that either immigrated to the United States or, they've never come here, but they're fascinated. And one of the things that really draws people in is like the Wild West. It's just to them such an iconic American thing. And so it's just really interesting to me. You have this boy who, grew up with the Sicilian culture, but he's in Louisiana, but there's still this appeal of the legends, of the Wild West. So he's touring with them, but that narrative would soon become central to his own life story. Now, the Wild West shows at this time are super interesting. If you have time to look into them, you should. They were a spectacle, blending facts and fiction, not unlike Hollywood today. And it's here that Oscar may have first begun to experiment with the idea of reinventing himself. Dressing up as an Indian wasn't just part of the performance. It was a way for Oscar to step into another identity, one that would later define his career. Over the last 2 years, I've been telling the stories that often get ignored. But lately, I've been facing an uphill battle behind the scenes of each video. My videos are getting flagged by YouTube when all I'm doing is sharing real history. If these stories have ever resonated with you or given you a new perspective, grab some Be a Good Ancestor merch and help me keep this channel going. Check out nytonashville.com. By the time Oscar returned to Los Angeles, the Western genre was booming, and Native American characters were high in demand, but there was a problem. Oscar de Corti was neither a cowboy nor a Native American. In an industry that thrived on authenticity, or at least the appearance of authenticity, Oscar realized that his Sicilian roots might limit his opportunities. Hollywood, as progressive as it may have seemed at the time, wasn't exactly known for casting Italians in leading roles. So Oscar made a decision that would change the course of his life. He would become Eyes Cody. Now, why did Oscar de Corti choose to adopt the persona of a Native American? Well, there's several possible explanations that I've read and just kind of thinking about it in general. And I was thinking, perhaps he sought to distance himself from the painful memories of his Louisiana childhood. Maybe reinventing himself as someone he saw as stronger, wiser, more connected to the land. Maybe as a practical matter, he saw that the film industry's fascination with Westerns and Native American characters offer him a steady work path. He's coming from a place where there was not a lot of money, and he's saying, wow, this is there's cash in this. This would be great for me and my family. So in a Hollywood that often pigeonholed actors into certain types, being a convincing Native American would set him apart and ensure he had a long and successful career. And so Oscar de Corti became Eyes Cody. He claimed that his father was Cherokee and his mother was Cree, and he wove this narrative that placed him kind of at the heart of America's Native history. He told people he was born in Oklahoma and that he was given the name Little Eagle at birth. I've read a book on him a very long time ago, and I think what is strange about stories like this is I think people they start to believe it about themselves. Like, they have said it so many times they actually do start to believe that this is true. So it's unclear whether or not where that line blurred for him here, but it's certain that he lived it with such conviction that people didn't really question this. And Eyes Cody wasn't just a name, though. It was an identity, a new identity. He fully embraced this persona, donning traditional, what he believed to be traditional Native American clothes, braiding his hair, and speaking as if he grew up, had a tribal experience. But it was a performance. It was a performance that he carried on the screen and off the screen as well. So he quickly became one of Hollywood's most sought after Native American actors. Starting in 1927, he appeared in like hundreds of films. He worked with people like John Wayne and Steve McQueen, and his portrayal of Native Americans was so convincing that he was frequently hired as a consultant for other films and television shows. People who were trying to ensure that their depiction of Native Americans was as accurate and authentic as possible. Like, this just gets crazier and crazier, right? And Eyes Cody's talents weren't limited, though, just to dramatic roles. He had the versatility to appear in comedic films, too. He worked with Bob Hope in The Paleface. So he found himself in demand. He's doing all kinds of films. He's consulting. He's doing all these things. But it wasn't just his on-screen roles that made him famous. Eyes Cody lived this adopted identity off the screen. He dressed the part. He wore beaded moccasins, had buckskin jacket. He walking around Los Angeles like this, his full outfit. And so for decades, he maintained this facade. Few people questioned it. And he had become so synonymous with Native American culture. He was the face. He was the face of it. And I think how most of us know him is from 1971. Just the commercial. We see a man dressed in traditional Native American attire, paddling his canoe through a river as he glides through the water. What begins as a pristine environment gradually turns polluted. As he steps onto the trash-littered shore and surveys all the destruction, a car speeds by, flinging a bag of garbage that bursts at his feet, and the camera zooms in on his solemn face, and a single tear rolls down his cheek. This scene was one of the most iconic public service announcements in American history, urging the nation to keep America beautiful. The man in the commercial was Eyes Cody. Cody's story is fascinating to me. I think it raises complex questions about identity, authenticity, the roles we play in life, and how our childhood shapes the way we interact with the world. In the end, Eyes Cody's legacy, Oscar's legacy, is as complicated, I think, as the man himself. He spent most of his life pretending to be someone he wasn't. But in doing so, he became a symbol of something even larger than himself. That commercial was very powerful. It really spoke to the nation about, needing to protect our environment and kind of our role in that. But it's one of those things where it's like, do the ends justify the means? I mean, we have to think about that. You have a boy born into this environment where Sicilians are fighting for their place in America, and Oscar is thinking to himself, I need to survive. I'm going to reinvent myself. And he may not have consciously thought that, but I mean, we can see looking at his biography, you're like, okay, like, you may not agree with what he did, but it makes some sense. It's within the context of marginalization and struggle for Sicilian immigrants that, Oscar, I think his name was Aspera Oscar, changed his identity. Oscar passed away in 1999, leaving behind a legacy that's controversial. I mean, he remains a controversial figure, admired by some, criticized by others. And I think his life raises question about identity, authenticity, and the roles we play, not just in front of the camera. And so, I'm fascinated by this because, again, I have a similar background to him, but I also have Indigenous heritage and all these other things. And just this idea of the reasons people do what they do. And that has been a really important part of piecing together my family story, even as a historian, because when I first started the journey, I was like, well, I was a historian by trade. This is my work. My hobby was doing ancestry, and I never had really thought about it as family history. But we need this history. We need to understand the context of where somebody is, situate our ancestors, situate these figures. What was it like where they were born? What was their childhood like? What happened? And again, not to say, and it's okay that you made up a whole thing, because it's obviously not, but to help us understand, this is why history is so important, because it is illuminating. It raises a lot of questions, and I think it points to some unexplored areas or history that I think is being explored, but not as much. In particular, the experience of Italians and Sicilians in Louisiana during Reconstruction, right after Reconstruction, as they're coming over. And the ripple effects to that are massive. They're massive. There are so many weird places to go with this. So if you are interested in any of the videos I did on that, I will leave a link to that below. And if you would like to support the channel by buying some merch, it would be so cool. I'll send you over there too, or you can go to newyorktonashville.com. Otherwise, we will talk soon.